From ABC, this is World News Tonight, with Peter Jennings in London, Max Robinson in Chicago, and from our desk in Washington, Frank Reynolds.
Good evening. The leader of the commando mission to rescue the American hostages in Iran has now given his version of what happened in the desert 1 week ago today. And Colonel Charles Beckwith said there was no way the mission could have continued with only 5 helicopters. We'll have a complete report on that later in this broadcast. But now there is a new hostage crisis, this one involving the Iranian embassy in London. And for the latest on that, here is Peter Jennings.
Frank, the embassy continues to be occupied by other Iranians. The 3 Iranian Arabs holding the hostages have said they will kill the Iranians inside if 91 Arab Iranian prisoners at home are not released. Late this morning, they let one British hostage go. He was a BBC News producer who had been inside seeking a visa when they took over. He was reportedly suffering from a stomach infection. The gunman first set a deadline of noon. It passed without incident. They set a second deadline.
All responsibility falls upon the Iranian government. If the Iranian government will acknowledge that they are negotiating with the British government, that will extend the time.
It also passed without incident, even though from Iran came a government rejection of any negotiation. It is believed there are at least 19 hostages still inside, 3 of whom are British. Outside, some of the ever-present supporters of Ayatollah Khomeini have offered to take their place. The police will not allow it. As the embassy is sovereign territory, British authorities cannot attack it without a request from Iran. It's not the British style anyway, at least not in the present circumstances. As Greg Dobbs reports, the British are playing for time.
The gunmen have forced the police to play for time through phone calls to newsmen.
After the deadline, we will kill everybody here, all the hostages.
So the police specialists have to negotiate around the clock here, but with special complications. Of all government agencies, they are the only ones actually talking with the gunmen. Their goal is to get all the hostages out alive. But the police can't make any significant concessions to the gunmen. All they can do is communicate the gunmen's major demands to the British government. However, those demands require action not by the government here, but by the government of Iran. So there's really very little that the British government can do to satisfy them.
Even the hostage takers appreciate that those sort of demands can take a long time to transmit between the principals concerned.
The fact is, while there has been constant movement at the police command post down the block from the embassy, that is not where major decisions are made. Elsewhere in London is an interagency crisis center. The Foreign Office, for instance, is part of it. They've not been asking the Iranian government's advice on the siege, but they have officially been keeping Iran informed. Tonight, another police spokesman made this announcement.
A message for the Iranian authorities in the name of all of the hostages has been given to the police with the approval of the terrorists.
The contents of the message still are undisclosed, but hopes here are that it's a turning point in the crisis at the embassy. Peter?
The Iranian Foreign Minister Sadegh Ghabzadeh is in Abu Dhabi today. He has condemned the embassy seizure and says it is in no way comparable to the occupation of the American embassy in Tehran.
The only common thing that they have is the names, embassy and hostages. Nothing else in common. Therefore, we are not going to concede.
Does it occur to you?
Don't worry, we are not being humiliated.
This is Bob Dyke in Tehran. President Abul Hassan Bani Sadr said his government will not give in. Bani Sadr said, "We are ready to accept the martyrdom of our children in England. We will not surrender to blackmail." While the government here seemed angrily resolute, on the streets of Tehran, people seemed to take the crisis in their stride. Iranian militants made no attempt to occupy the British embassy here. The Fedayeen held this rally to oppose the clergy's attempt to dominate everyone's life. Meanwhile, several gelignite bombs were planted around the city, but the Iranian army defused them. There was a march on the American embassy today after Khomeini exhorted the country's workers to unite against imperialism and Zionism. If, as many people believe, there are still American hostages inside the U.S. compound, it was for them another morning of listening to the same old racket. There was no further word today about when the bodies of the 8 American servicemen will be returned home. Bob Dyke, ABC News, Tehran.
The British capital, of course, is somewhat more democratic than Tehran. Outside this embassy, or as close as police will allow them, all sorts of people have been taking advantage of a very serious occasion. These Iranians may be concerned about the hostages, but they themselves have been the object of considerable derision. Some Americans, many British. Some anti-Khomeini Iranians use the occasion to call for Khomeini's downfall, even his death. At one point today, a scuffle between the pro-Khomeini supporters and police. One policeman had his leg broken, and at least 8 Iranians were arrested. Only at one point, and for a brief period, was the tension broken. A small band of Hare Krishna arrived on the scene, beating their drums and chanting for peace. A British policeman said of these goings-on, "It's getting to be a 3-ring circus. All we need are the clowns and the elephants." One other comment we've heard here from an Iranian. "I have an uncle in there," he said privately. "Now I know how the Americans feel." Max?
Thank you, Peter. The leader of the commando team that tried to rescue the American hostages surfaced today, and ahead we'll hear from Colonel Charles Beckwith about how his mission to the Iranian desert came to its fiery conclusion. And a look at May Day protests in Moscow, where 16 ambassadors, including this country's, boycotted the annual parade.
ABC's World News Tonight, brought to you by Triscuit Wafers. Delicious whole wheat Triscuits, plain or topped. Triscuits taste great with everything. Triscuit, baked only by Nabisco.
Nothing looks like it, tastes like it, crunches or snaps like it. There's nothing like a Triscuit whole wheat wafer. Cheese it up, spread it up, dip it or ham it up. There's nothing like a tasty Triscuit wafer.
Take it from me, Shirley Jones, nothing performs like Nabisco's Triscuit, alone or topped.
There's nothing like a Triscuit whole wheat wafer.
These days, it makes good sense to protect the investment you've made in your automobile.
Well, young fella, best of luck with her.
Which is why Black & Decker's come out with a brand new car care line. Our versatile 12-volt light, our inflator to pump up your tires, impact wrench, handy vac to clean up the inside, our polisher to shine up the outside. And like every Black & Decker product, our 13 car care tools get incredible mileage. So remember, new car or old,
Black & Decker has the tools you need to help keep it humming right along.
My God, we're going to fail. That was the thought that went through the mind of Colonel Charles Beckwith, the leader of the commando force that landed in Iran last week, as he realized the mission could not be continued. Ever since the rescue attempt, there have been rumors that Colonel Beckwith disagreed with the decision to end the mission. But he showed up at the Pentagon today to set the record straight. No cameras, no microphones were permitted, but Pentagon correspondent John McWethy was among a small group of reporters invited to meet and hear the colonel.
A 27-year Army veteran who nearly died of wounds in Vietnam stood before reporters at the Pentagon. He was tense, spoke with a rasping Southern accent, every inch a soldier. He was on the first plane to land at the desert refueling stop and hadn't been on the ground 10 minutes when he saw a bus driving toward him out of the night. "For God's sake, stop the bus," he shouted. His men fired into the air. The bus stopped. 44 Iranians were searched and taken into custody. The helicopters finally arrived, 2 hours behind schedule. Beckwith, already frustrated by the delay, finds out yet another helicopter can't fly. That left 5. The site commander to Beckwith, "Would you consider taking the 5 and going ahead?" Beckwith thought about it and said, "There's just no way." And later, "Sir, I recommend we abort." Within minutes, the president had agreed. Would Beckwith have gone ahead? "I'm not about to be a party to loading on a bunch of aircraft and going up and murdering a bunch of the finest soldiers in the world. I ain't gonna do that. I get paid for shouldering responsibility and being a leader." As for accusations that he had argued to go ahead, it really burns me. I'm not that kind of man. Of course I want to get the job done, and he who dares wins. Under that circumstances, it's a no-win situation. Half hour after the decision to abort, one of the helicopters slashes into a C-130. There's an explosion, ammunition and fuel blazing into the night. Like the 4th of July, Beckwith said, with a fireball at the bottom. 4 of his men rush into the inferno, pulling 2 from the burning wreckage. 8 men are dead and must be left behind. Beckwith cries. I did 3 years in Vietnam, and I don't like to leave anybody. But anyone who wastes additional human life to go and get a body out, I don't think that's very prudent. Beckwith's plane was among the last off the ground. It raced across the desert, slammed into an embankment near the deserted road, bounced over it, and was off into the night. A crushing disappointment that night, but today, upon reflection, Beckwith said, I'm proud of the President. John McWethy, ABC News, the Pentagon.
There was more praise for the President today from Admiral Thomas Hayward, the Chief of Naval Operations. Hayward delivered a speech defending the rescue mission and denouncing what he called the darker side of our country. In the Admiral's words, the excessive search for things and people to criticize, condemn, tear down, and denigrate.
With the vision of 20/20 hindsight, all manner of political pundits have come out of their shells to take shots at the President. It's an easy thing to do. It requires little courage, little judgment, no risk. And as too many have demonstrated, no real need for any great familiarity with the facts. But I want you, and anyone else who might hear me, know that the Joint Chiefs of Staff are absolutely confident that the President made the right decision.
This is Britt Hume on Capitol Hill. A number of members here were furious last week when the information they got on the hostage mission from administration briefings turned out to be less than they read in the next morning's papers. That has only added to the determination here to investigate the episode, especially among senior members of the Senate Armed Services Committee.
I think we're going to have to look into the whole scope of the operation, the planning of it, the intelligence that went into it, the command and control aspect of it, the question of unit integrity, the selection of equipment, the state of the maintenance of the equipment.
We need to know when the mission started, what the nature of it was initially, what the Joint Chiefs of Staff recommended initially, what changes were made, and was it a sensible and prudent undertaking?
There are at least 3 committees here planning investigations of the mission. Indeed, a dispute broke out today over whether the House or the Senate Armed Services Committee would hear first from the star witness, mission leader Colonel Charles Beckwith. Under the circumstances, it would be hard for the Carter administration to hush up anything about this episode, even if it wanted to. Britt Hume, ABC News, on Capitol Hill.
2 other notes relating to the hostage rescue mission. The Russians have now offered their view of the operation. The Communist Party paper Pravda claimed today the mission was actually a cover for a coup, an attempt by the United States to overthrow the government of Iran. Incidentally, a Pentagon spokesman said again today the Russians had no idea an American force had landed in Iran until after the commando unit had been withdrawn.
When my customers first saw this house, they were skeptical. She wanted charming and old, but he wanted something newer, less work. Well, when they came inside, they both loved it, but they were still worried about getting a mortgage on an older home, which is why I'm personally showing it again to the appraiser. He'll love it.
Gallery of Home sales counselors make it their business to know their home buyers and their lenders. Discover the Gallery of Home's difference.
Hi, you got the loan. Just like you, they thought it was a great buy.
Maxwell House's coffee to relax with. Maxwell Houses.
Good coffee.
Maxwell Houses.
Good show.
Good to the last drop. Maxwell House.
There's nothing like relaxing with a cup of Maxwell House coffee. Coffee you can count on. Always good to the last drop.
Maxwell Houses.
Good ending.
Good to the last drop. Maxwell House.
The Cordoba LS is a pure, fuel-efficient Cordoba. It's the outside that's different.
What have they done to my car?
They made a Cordoba for me, Dad. The new Cordoba LS. Yours is elegant, and mine's sporty. LS is easy on gas, has a great-looking grill, bucket seats, the works. And a guy my age can afford it.
I like what they've done
to my car.
We're so sure you'll buy our lease Cordoba LS, we'll pay you $50 to test drive one.
This is what you should be having for breakfast tomorrow morning. It's Kellogg's Most, and it's different than any nutritional cereal you can buy. Kellogg's Most cereal contains a multivitamin and iron supplement, the goodness of wheat germ, and the high fiber of bran, all woven into a combination of ingredients no other cereal offers, and a crunchy wheat taste. Delicious. With all that going for you, why settle for less than Most?
Japan's Prime Minister Ohira met with President Carter today and promised that Japan will do its utmost to help secure the release of the hostages in Iran by peaceful means. Later, the two leaders stepped into the Rose Garden to sign an agreement providing for cooperation on scientific and technological research. It happened to be a beautiful day, and the Rose Garden was obviously a pleasant place to be. But, as Mr. Carter announced yesterday, he now plans to forsake the roses and magnolias for the campaign trail. There were more signs today that he is gearing up to hit the road, as we hear in this report from White House correspondent Sam Donaldson.
Even though this morning's trip was only to a downtown Washington hotel, the sounds and sights of campaigning were in the air today, as the president addressed a conference on the handicapped. And later, back in the White House, the old familiar Jimmy Carter brand of campaign optimism was heard in a talk to a group of accountants about the economy.
We believe that we've turned the corner now. We're making good progress on interest rates coming down, and we have sound indications that the inflation rate will also drop significantly during the summer.
Some private economists immediately disputed that rosy prediction, saying the country is actually headed for a deep recession. But that's all part of political campaigning.
Carter Mondale.
And over at the campaign headquarters, they took calls from Carter Mondale supporters around the country who said they were delighted the president will resume campaigning. In the White House driveway, one of the president's admirers from Indiana brushed aside the criticism that Mr. Carter was breaking his solemn promise not to campaign until the hostages were freed.
I think the man's got a right to adjust his life like we do ours. We all say we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that, but I think if circumstances change, I think you've got a right to change your mind.
Hostages are not home yet. Circumstances did not change.
I understand, but if there were a domestic crisis somewhere in the United States where it required his attention, don't you think it'd be appropriate for him to go?
So the president will go out to talk about domestic crisis. The Iranian crisis no longer a campaign plus. Sam Donaldson, ABC News, the White House.
The League of Women Voters today invited the president and Senator Kennedy to debate in San Francisco on May 25th. That's just 1 week before the California primary. Kennedy immediately accepted. The White House has not yet responded, though it was made clear yesterday Mr. Carter does not intend to debate Kennedy. Max?
Frank, George Bush is making President Carter's handling of the Iranian situation an issue in the latest primary campaign in Texas. And as Susan King reports, even though he's lagging in the polls, Bush is talking like a winner.
George Bush is looking very much the part of the long, tall Texan. He's back home campaigning, eating barbecue, and talking big Texas talk.
How are you? My gosh!
Bush lost 2 U.S. Senate races on Texas soil, but his Pennsylvania win last week put spirit in his step and proved selling George Bush on campaign TV spectaculars worked. He is doing television again in Texas, selling his experience, sometimes with wit.
But when I last saw Chairman Mao, how do you like that for name dropping?
At campaign stops, Bush has refined his foreign affairs pitch. He has capitalized on the Iranian issue, and campaign phone banks indicate it's been effective. But the issue which has fired Bush up in Texas, unsigned leafleting against him because of his past membership in world affairs organizations like the Trilateral Commission, whose critics insist it wants a one-world government.
It's the worst, the lowest, filthiest ebb in politics.
At a news conference today, Bush sharpened his attack.
Whether Reagan's people are passing out this unsigned, hateful literature, and the answer is yes.
Win or lose, Texas will not be Bush's last race. He has new enthusiasm, and for him, success is relative. Bush's campaign has targeted a few congressional districts, which they think they can win and where they can pick up some delegates. That won't be enough to beat Ronald Reagan. But Bush's strategy is, if he can do better than Gerald Ford in '76, who walked out of Texas with only 20% of the vote, that will be success. Susan King, ABC News, Houston.
Responding to the Bush charges about the leaflets, Ronald Reagan said, quote, "I frankly don't know what George is talking about." Reagan says he knows nothing about the leaflets or their content.
Shorty Hal for Amway.
I'm one of 500,000 Amway distributors worldwide. I'm meeting men and women from all walks of life who've also started their own part-time Amway businesses. With Amway, they meet new people and earn extra income. Come join our world. With Amway, you can do it too.
Contact an Amway distributor near you.
Get the whole story.
What do you take for a headache?
Anacin, but not at night.
Bayer aspirin, but not at night.
Tylenol, but not at night.
What did you take at night?
Excedrin PM.
Excedrin PM.
Excedrin PM.
Many people who use different pain relievers during the day have chosen Excedrin PM at night. The reason is Excedrin PM relieves your headache and gives extra help to relax and sleep. So whatever you take during the day, at night, try the nighttime pain reliever.
Excedrin PM.
This is Boot Hill. Every John Deere dealer has one. It's sort of a burial ground for trade-ins people bring in. Some of them are only a few years old, and already they're done for. At John Deere, we think lawn and garden tractors, riders, and mowers should live longer than that. So we build them tight and solid so they'll last. You may pay a little more for a John Deere, but like they say, you get what you pay for.
If you work, you know how tough it is to go home and start cooking. I've been working for years, so I've learned a few secrets. Anytime I don't feel like cooking, I let Stouffer's help me out. They make so many good things. Turkey tetrazzini, scallops and shrimp mariner, cream chicken, and lots more. I worked hard today, but thanks to Stouffer's, I'm not cooking tonight.
The Palestinian autonomy negotiations got underway today in Israel. The talks, agreed to by Egyptian President Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Begin during their recent visits to this country, will alternate between Israel and Egypt and are to be non-stop to try to produce an agreement before the May 26th deadline called for in the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty. Peter?
In other news overseas, reports of another serious anti-Soviet protest in Afghanistan. An Indian report from Kabul says that Afghanistani troops this week repeatedly fired on thousands of rock-throwing demonstrators. Nearly 60 demonstrators were reportedly killed and more than 100 wounded. Witnesses in another report were quoted as saying that Soviet helicopter gunships also fired on the students. As Ann Garrels reports from Moscow, the West showed its displeasure about Afghanistan today during the May Day parade.
As flags waved and crowds cheered the opening of the parade, Moscow's evening papers were already out, proclaiming what a success the day had been. May Day comes and goes like clockwork, and as the Kremlin chimes struck 10, Leonid Brezhnev waved to the thousands of athletes from his traditional perch over Red Square. May Day is when the Soviets publicly pat themselves on the back. The posters praise the victories of communism, the successes of the Soviet workers. Surprisingly, there were only fleeting references to the Moscow Olympics, though a couple of floats were dedicated to the Afghan Revolution. But completely absent at this massive display were several Western ambassadors. With the United States, 16 countries boycotted the parade to protest the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. This was not reported in this evening's newspapers. Ann Garrels, ABC News, Moscow.
Well, in this country, May Day protesters took to the streets in a number of cities. Most of the demonstrators were peaceful, but in Cleveland, about 50 members of the May Day Brigade were pelted with rocks, bottles, and eggs by downtown office workers. Mounted police in full riot gear had to be called in to break up fistfights between the two groups. There were no serious injuries in Cleveland, but in Los Angeles, a number of demonstrators were hurt. Demonstrators were hurt and some 25 were arrested in a bloody brawl with police along that city's Wilshire Boulevard. Fighting broke out after the protesters refused to obey police orders to clear the streets. In other news, General Motors is announcing still more layoffs. Nearly 34,000 auto workers will be temporarily laid off next week at 6 auto plants and 1 truck facility. Well, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office confirmed today it is in the midst of an ongoing investigation into charges surrounding the ABC television program Charlie's Angels. A former ABC attorney claims money from Charlie's Angels was diverted to another ABC series, Starsky and Hutch, rather than going to Robert Wagner and Natalie Wood, who own half of Charlie's Angels. Both series are produced by Spelling Goldberg Productions, which denies the charges. And ABC issued a statement saying it had previously commissioned an outside investigation which found no improprieties.
If anybody appreciates the end of the day, it's a Big A Auto Parts store. Because during the day, no other store works harder to give you quality parts and friendly service. Why, only this morning.
Okay, you need a muffler and a tailpipe? Brakes for a 67 Plymouth? We'll have it here by 11 o'clock.
Yes, ma'am. I can show you how that goes on.
You need 6 gas cans? Yes, we can grind drums. Is it a V8 or a 6?
Quality parts, friendly service. That's Big A, the hard-working auto parts store.
Refreshingly cool. Deliciously inviting. Delightfully appealing. 100% pure orange juice from Florida. It isn't just for breakfast anymore.
Finally tonight, the federal government has decided to set up a tent city at Eglin Air Force Base in northern Florida to take care of the thousands of Cubans who are taking advantage of the opportunity now to come to this country. Officials in Key West said today there is no end in sight to the rush of refugees. Here's a report from Al Dale.
Here is where the exodus begins, Mariel Harbor near Havana. This exclusive videotape was provided by a WPLG TV camera team who were detained by Cuban authorities for a week. The people on the boats came over from South Florida, hoping for a quick turnaround with loved ones on board. But they had to wait for days. The boredom and changing exit signals from the Cuban government causing tensions to erupt. The most profound disappointment, the Cuban requirement that the boats must take 3 or 4 refugees from the Peruvian embassy for each family member allowed to leave. The destination, Key West, where more than 5,000 have arrived since the boat lift began. En route, many boats have run into trouble. Some have sunk. The Coast Guard has assisted more than 200 and towed dozens to safety. The hundreds more who arrived today strained the reception center near Miami to its limit, with still more on the way. When the promised federal processing center is set up, these buses will no longer bring the exiles to Miami, thus relieving the county and state of a heavy burden. With 45 agents here, the FBI has tightened its screening of the refugees, especially young males suspected of having criminal records or of being Castro agents. More than 100 have been detained for further investigation. And still the boats come, their passengers' faces and actions, speaking the international language of hope. Al Dale, ABC News, Miami.
Thank you, Al. There will be further reports on the Cuban situation tonight on Nightline with Ted Koppel. That's our report for now on World News Tonight. For ABC News, good night.
From ABC, this has been World News Tonight.